Bop bop ski dop bop bop squat bop ring bow.
What up, sitcommers? Welcome back to Bros Before Shows, where every week we relive the morals and laughs of your favorite sitcoms. This is Zach T. and Taylor, and we are on Season 1, Episode 7 of our first sitcom, Frasier. This one is all about ethics and temptation. Be sure to follow and comment, and let us know what sitcom you want to hear for Season 2. T. and Taylor, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I did have a couple of things we needed to hash out as far as like what are our role? You know how podcasts have people that officially do things. You know, there's like a social media guy and the writers and producers and things like that. So I did want to kind of hash out what exactly we're all doing. I will say I don't know what any of those people do, so I kind of came up with my own jobs, and so I want to see who wants to do what. The first job would be sexual appeal. So we'll see who wants to be our sexual appeal guru. I think the razzle dazzle is another job that we need to assign, and then finally the Mr. T effect. Those are the three jobs that I think we need to figure out who's doing what with this podcast, because I don't want crossover. Everybody needs to stay in their lane.
I pity the fool who's got to do the Mr. T thing, is all I'm saying.
Dude, I think Taylor's the razzle dazzle. Let's be honest.
So, which one do you jump on immediately then? Are you doing sex appeal?
Okay. So
We're
Taylor's
for free.
We don't know. We don't talk for free. All right, we're not getting paid to do this, but whatever. Anyway, Taylor's a razzle dazzle. We've established that. I think we've all agreed on that. I think your name is T, so I think the Mr. T effect goes to T, right?
This whole thing was just a ploy to get you to be the sex appeal guy, dude. It was that mustache you used to wear.
What are we?
This
I gotta
was
say?
rigged.
Yeah. I don't know that this was a Democratic vote, but okay.
Listen, I'll be in charge of the sex appeal if that's what you guys want. But let's get into this recap of our first episode. Let's stop joking around. We're here to do a job. We don't talk for free, so let's get to work. So this one is called We're gonna get into this review here. This one's called Call Me Irresponsible. Starts off at the radio station, just like every other episode so far. And a gentleman named Marco calls in, and his girlfriend wants more commitment out of him, but Marco wants to, quote, keep his options open. So Frasier tells him to either commit or break it off. And that's kind of where we enter our story.
I'm going to jump in here because we got a couple of celebrity guests. So, Marco I'll talk about first. His real name is Bruno Kirby. He was an actor who played a couple roles in the 90s, from City Slickers to The Basketball Diaries with Leonardo DiCaprio. He was in Stuart Little. He was in When Harry Met Sally, and he was in Good Morning Vietnam as well with the late, great Robin Williams. But before Marco comes on, we have our first caller, Hank, who's having trouble hearing what Frasier's saying because he has his radio and his phone at the time. Guess who that was?
Tom Hanks.
Eddie Van Halen.
No way.
I swear to you,
Wow.
Eddie Van Halen had like a bit part, and it's funny because he's like, you would think he would know about microphones and stuff. I don't know.
Huh. The second best frontman of that band. Just kidding. I'm not going to get into that argument. But Davey Lee Roth. But anyway. Wow, interesting. So we've got Eddie Van Halen calling in. We've got, who is the other guy?
We got Bruno Kirby.
Ooh, we don't talk about Bruno. To quote my
Did
wife.
you just come up with that?
No, shut up, dude. It's from, shut up, dude. Encanto. Or something like that. Anyway,
Nailed it.
leave us a comment. Let us know which cartoon that's from.
I really thought the funny moment was between Frasier and Roz, and he says, and she's just kind of complaining about all the guys that she's meeting, and Frasier says, "I guess you're just destined to be single, loveless, and spinsterhood."
Yeah, not the nicest thing to say on public radio.
No.
yeah, put her out there like that. So then we get to the second scene. It was the night before Christmas, and Daphne and Martin are putting up the Christmas tree because they want to get their Christmas photo 2 months early. Frasier was taking a nap, and he comes out and says, "How long have I been asleep?" And Martin wants him to put this hat on. He says he's not going to wear it, and then Martin is wearing this goofy hat, and he says to Frasier, "Well, it'll look stupid if you don't wear the hat." Um, and then they start arguing about the hat, and Daphne says, "Stop arguing. Are you guys forgetting what day it is?" And then Frasier goes, "It's October 31st."
I think during that scene, Frasier comes out and says, "How long have I slept?" But I thought that was in response to Daphne telling a story about an uncle who would sleep for long stretches of time, and one day he went into his room and went to sleep, and then 3 days later, 4 days later, the grandma's still like, "Yeah, he's sleeping," but he hasn't moved in the bed for 3 or 4 days.
Turns out he
dream,
died.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it turned out he died.
That's pretty funny. So let's see. Then we get back to the radio station, and an angry female fan is waiting for Frasier. It turns out it's Marco's girlfriend, the caller who he told to break it off with his girlfriend, and she is mad at Frasier that he told him to break it off and wants him to pay for some of the things that he said on the radio. Frasier explains exactly what Marco said, that he wanted to, quote, keep his options open. And she begins crying, and Frasier begins consoling her. Another good joke in this one, he says, "Don't cry." And he says, "You're in a place of business." And so Frasier ends up getting her M&Ms, and they are kind of sitting there talking, and he says he's been divorced from Lilith. She says she stayed because she had a lot invested, and it turns out as they're talking, they hit it off and start to discover that they have things in common, and this little bit of a romantic attraction. Then we get to the next scene where it's called Kiss Me Kate. They're back at the coffee shop. They're planning one of their third or fourth dates and trying to figure out what to do. And Kate, the woman, suggests that they stay in. My favorite joke of this one, she says, "I have to go home and change before our date." And he says, "Don't ever change. I like you just the way you are." And the whole coffee shop goes, "Oh," like it's the worst, like the cheesiest line of all time. Niles comes in and says, quote, "Who is that Baberama?" And they begin talking about how they met. And Niles questions Frasier's ethics because he's dating a patient's ex-girlfriend, and he told the patient to break up with her. He says rationalization is the last refuge of an unsound argument, and so he clearly doesn't like the ethics that Frasier's displaying, but Frasier keeps kind of saying, "I don't really care. I'm going to do what I want."
Yeah, I love how this entire time Niles is given in this whole take on his ethics, when at the same time this married man is going over to Frasier's house just to hang out with Daphne and buying her stuff all the time, and you know what I mean? That's like played for laughs.
Yeah, that's a good point with Niles and Daphne. That is a good point. I didn't even think of that. Yeah. So then we get the next scene. He's back. They're back at the radio station. Marco calls in and says that he saw his ex-girlfriend Kate with another man in her driveway. He couldn't see who it was, but he thinks that he wants her back. And Frasier tells him, he says, "No, you're just jealous. Don't go back with her. Move on." And Roz, who kind of knows that this is Kate's ex-boyfriend and Frasier has an interest, is displeased with him telling her that. So I think we're getting into the moral of this one, which is the question of, ethics versus desire and temptation and things. Niles picks Frasier up in his car and asks him, "Can you honestly say that the advice you gave Marco is in his best interest or in your best interest?" And Frasier comes out and says it. He says, "I don't care."
I loved, just to cut back to the scene in the radio station, when Frasier was trying his hardest to not talk to Marco on the line, and he's telling Roz before they're getting on the call, "I'm not talking to him. I'm not talking to him." And then the show starts, and he's like, "Well, who do we have?" And she's like, "Well, we have Marco on line 1." He says, "Who's that on line 3?" And she says, "Oh, well, that's this such and such. Oops, I dropped it. Marcos,"
Yeah.
and then makes him talk to him. That was great.
Roz kind of makes him own up to his behaviors, right? I think she's finding some entertainment in the whole thing, the drama, but think she's also making him own up to what he's been doing.
Yeah.
I also have been loving the I've also been loving the interplay between when Frasier's at work and when he's not at work. So when he's at work, he, in his interaction with Catherine, he says, everybody wants to be loved and to matter to someone and for someone. And he has this like kind of very like intimate, emotional conversation with her. And then you get him outside and he's outside of work environment and he's, having very different conversations with Niles. He's yelling at Eddie. It's just I've really been enjoying the difference between work Frasier and at home Frasier.
I think that's the essence of the show. Like I've said it before, most people look at the show and they just see Frasier as being kind of pretentious and snobby, and they're turned off immediately. But the whole thing is this snobby, pretentious guy just fumbling through life and making mistakes and needing the people around him, who aren't as pretentious to kind of. So yeah, I think that's the charm. Part of the charm of the show is Frasier is two different people, depending on where he's at, or even when he's with his friends or whatever.
Yeah, and I've said before, and I'll talk about it a little more when we speak to the message of this episode. They always use what happens at the beginning of the station to inform the rest of the episode, and it always does feel like Frasier always just needs to take his own advice. Like whatever he's saying to those people, he knows in his heart of hearts that there's a better answer, but he always just gets so swept up in his emotions or his identity or whatever the case may be, that he ends up getting in his own way. But it's always funny if you just listen to the advice Frasier gives and then apply it to Frasier later on, it would have sorted itself out.
And so we get to the last scene of this one where Kate is at Frasier's apartment for the date. She comes to him and they begin kissing, and we discovered earlier that Frasier, when he is going to violate his ethics, begins retching, and Niles begins having nosebleeds. They've done that since they were children, and so they begin kissing, and Frasier starts retching, and they fall in Martin's chair as they're kind of getting hot and heavy, and the chair starts vibrating, which is kind of a funny scene. And then every time they try some different things, every time they keep kissing, he starts retching, and we because he's violating his ethics, and he realizes it and says specifically to her, "It's us. Every time we touch and kiss, I get queasy, but don't take it personally." And then Frasier kind of confesses to her that he told Marco to break it off with her. And she's kind of like, "I don't care about Marco. Like, let's, it's me and you now." And he still feels like he's violating his ethics. I like the part right at the end here where she kind of, it's almost like she's tempting him or telling him what he missed. She's like, "We would have the steamy sex, this best sex of your life, and all of this," and he still holds on to his ethics. And then we get, the last scene is the credits, and it's the Christmas photo that they had planned on, and it was pretty funny.
Yeah, for sure. There were a couple things. I did love that moment where she's like, "Oh, well, the thought of making love to me makes you sick to your stomach," and he's like, "Yes, but don't take it personally." That was pretty good. And then I just wondered what would be illegal in 48 states. That was a little concerning to me. Like, what are we I know we're not going to talk too much about it, but just let your minds wander for a moment on that one.
Yeah, when she's telling him about the sex that they would have had, and she says it would have been illegal in 48 states. Yeah. It does make you wonder.
I don't know, that one turned my stomach a little bit, I'm not going to lie.
I really enjoyed the quote, "I'm not going to be outperformed by a Barca lounger," which
with Martin's chair.
Pretty funny. Yeah.
He's like, "You don't think I don't want to take you over to that Eames Classic and show you why it's the best engineered chair in the world?"
Yeah.
But also, TJ, you were talking about how Frasier just needs to take his own advice. And Zach had just finished talking about the scene in the car, where Niles is, really bringing up this ethical dilemma of, you're a doctor, you don't date patients, and you shouldn't date patients' significant others. Like, this is a big deal, buddy. And And Frasier says, "Man, Niles, I like this car. Is it new?" He said, "Yeah, a patient helped me get a great discount on the lease."
Yep.
Yeah, and then his nose starts bleeding.
His nose starts bleeding.
Which plays in later in the show. Niles will, anytime he lies, he gets a nosebleed. He has to put his little handkerchief that he wipes chairs down with. He has to put it up. Yep. So they keep that one running as well. But yeah, that was a
Yeah,
good
see,
joke.
this is why I think I'm only ever going to do jobs where there isn't like an expected code of ethics, so I can just get away with it. You know what I mean?
There
There you
you
go.
go.
I did want to ask you. So you guys have seen this episode multiple times, and presumably you saw it when you were younger. This was a pretty like for 1993. It seems to me to be a very sort of sexually explicit episode for a like TV sitcom. How did you guys like handle this episode when you were younger? Like, how did it make sense to you? What'd you get from it?
Yeah, I think I was the only one that watched it like when I was young, and it was I had a bedroom in the basement, and it was on a about 1 foot by 1 foot box TV that we got for. Actually, I think our older brother got it as a Christmas gift one year, and then I inherited it when I got the room. And it was on late at night, and I was probably 12 at the time, and I was watching it by myself, and it's
We all know what
it's
that means.
yeah, and so I don't think it was that awkward. I think I kind of had an understanding of what was going on there, and at the end of it, Frasier kind of comes out of it and decides it's not a good idea anyway. So I think if anything, it taught me like the ethics of like don't let your sexual desires or just desires or temptations in general get in the way of doing the right thing. I think that's even at 12 years old probably what I took from it.
Yeah, I agree in terms of the message of it. Sticking to your principles. I think, like I said before, I always contrast the call with the episode. You see Marcos, who is kind of exemplifying the opposite of that. He is looking only for personal gain, and he's discounting the feelings of his significant other. And even if it's like if you don't have feelings, like if she's not the person who you intend to be with, the right thing to do would be to kind of let her go and do that in a way that's respectful to that person. So there was a deep contrast, I think, with how the call was handled with Marcos and with how Fraser ended up doing it. And unfortunately, it took him getting physically ill to really prompt that response out of him. But at the end, they would probably interpret that as some sort of something in his subconscious that wouldn't let him be unethical, and probably because of the way that he was raised, because Martin was so kind of hard headed, and Martin was such a righteous person. I think that's they talk about it later in the series. That's kind of what they take from their father that they're really proud of themselves for.
Well, and that directly comes up in our next episode about how Frasier respected Martin for his ethics. So I hadn't really connected the ethics between these two episodes, or between 7 and 8, but I think that's an amazing connection that you're spending 7 really focusing on Niles and Frasier's ethics, and then in episode 8, which we'll get to in the next episode, we'll talk a little bit more about how Frasier respected his dad because he thought he was such an ethical man.
Man, that's the
and that's
razzle
something they
dazzle.
bring up a lot.
That's the razzle dazzle I'm talking about, Taylor. There it is. T, way to bring the Mr. T effect. I think we've got it, guys. I think we figured it out. You guys have any other favorite jokes or anything before we get to T's hypothetical corner?
No, I think we touched on everything that I that piqued my interest in this one.
All right, let's get to T's
gonna
hypothetical. Oh yeah, sorry.
Last thing before the hypotheticals, you won't be alone tonight. You'll have your ethics.
Yes, what a great line. Yeah, it it still feels kind of lonely to be there with just your ethics, but hey, at least you could die a happy person, I guess. But no, definitely I think a good moral in this one of like follow your ethics over your, be a good person. In the end, it will be better for you. If you're just following your desires your whole life, you're going to end up, in a ditch somewhere. And so follow
Even
your
if
ethics
it's not
over your
better
desires.
for you even if it's not better for you personally all the time, like you're creating a world and an environment in which you would want to live. You would expect and hope that other people would do the same. So like even if you don't end up on top all the time, because that's really what people go for when they're chasing sensations, when they're chasing power or whatever. They're not really considering what the effect is on the environment after that. So you may not like the outcome of sticking to your own ethics all the time. I'm sure Fraser wanted to have that illegal in 48 states kind of sex, but at the end of the day, he created a world in which therapists act how therapists should act, and that was important to him.
Yeah, well, on that note, let's get into T's hypothetical corner. TJ gives us a hypothetical, but the corner is also hypothetical. We're not sure if it actually exists or not. T, what do you got?
Yeah, it's more of a rounded edge. So in this episode, Fraser asks, or he says to Eddie, "Hey Eddie, how I envy you. The biggest questions in your life are who's going to walk me, who's going to feed me. I won't know that kind of joy for another 40 years." So my question to you guys is, we all think of incontinence in old age, but what are the things that you're really, really looking forward to not having to deal with, in terms of your responsibilities when you're 80, 90 years old?
Be honest with you, have you ever been to a nursing home? It's pretty dope. I mean, they're nicer ones, but it's pretty dope, man. Like, there's bingo all the time. Like you don't have to like mow the grass or do any of that. I'm looking forward into at least a 55 and older community, if not going into a nursing home. I've said that for years. I'm waiting for the day.
How about you, Taylor?
I think I'm really looking forward to not having to mow my lawn anymore. That would be real nice. Real nice.
Yeah, you can tell what time of year it is because we both were like, you don't have to mow the lawn. We're over it.
I was gonna say I put some thought into this too. I used to do DoorDash, and I would always be dropping food off to the old folks' homes. I'm really excited just to have a board game league. Like those, they just get entertainment like a flippin' cruise ship, dude. Like it's just built for them. They sit around their apartments, they drink, I don't know, they dance the tango every Thursday or whatever. Like I just want to have a set schedule of just fun stuff to do all the time. It seems great.
Yeah, dude. If I could get into a nursing home right now, I'm telling you, I'd be there. We could change our names and like get fake identities. We could be Mr. T, Razzle Dazzle, and sexual, whatever. But I think we stick with it. But anyway, as far as our Hike Up Mount sitcom, what do you guys rate this one? I'm gonna give it like a 6.5. Not my favorite.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think this was my least favorite of the season so far. I think it's probably a 6 for me.
I was swayed by IMDb's 7.8, but
Wow.
I know, but I don't know. I personally, I'm a big fan of ethical conversations. I think everybody needs to be kind of reminded and grounded from time to time. And I feel like at the time this show was coming out, there probably weren't a ton of shows that were directly addressing ethical dilemmas, certainly in this way. I think I kind of go with the 7 because of how cool I think the idea is and how well I think it was done. Not my favorite we've seen so far, but I do think I'm going to rate it high.
Nice. I'm not gonna lie to you. I stopped keeping track of the scores as far as our Hike Up Mount sitcom because we were doing 0.5s and it's just too much work for me. So anyway, we're all getting up the mountain together. Taylor liked this one the best. We will come back next time with episode 8, which is called Beloved Infidel. Be sure to follow, comment, let us know what you would do if you were Frasier. Let us know what you think of T's hypothetical. Let us know your favorite jokes. Make sure to follow so you don't miss the episodes as we put them out. T, hit us with that outro.
Boom, 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 boom. Hey, baby, I hear the blues are calling. Tossed salads and scrambled eggs. That's right, I said toast.
Good night, Seattle. We love you.